Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Education USA Fair 2020. My name is Jason Sherrill, and I'm here with my colleague Sandro Molina. I think you can see both of us on your screens. I am an Education USA advisor at the Fulbright Commission in Peru, and Sandro is our Education USA advisor at the Centro Cultural Peruano Norteamericano in the city of Arequipa, to the southern region of Peru. So as you've noted on your programs, today's session will be in English, and it will be recorded, and you will have access to this information for around a month. At the end of the presentation, I'll let you know more about that. So this presentation was geared toward graduate studies, but I'm going to actually detail something quite specific for you, and this is how to contact graduate program professors. And so basically what we'll talk about, and there is kind of an ulterior motive to talking to programs and university professors. So number one is we'll just simply talk about the process of contacting programs and program directors and the logistics of doing the writing. But my main goal with this talk today was to kind of rethink or to see how this contact can help you when you're writing your statement of purpose. As you will all recall, universities, especially graduate programs, require statements of purpose for the application process. So that's kind of what I was thinking, is we'll talk about contacting professors, but we'll go a little bit beyond that and talk about how that can affect your application, specifically in the statement of purpose. So we'll look at the before part of this process. So first, I talk about determine the necessity. Do you really have to write to the professor, to the program, or not? So what are some considerations? Number one, the type of program. There are some programs that may be less likely or maybe less necessary to write to the program and again establish contact with the program and associate professors or program directors. For example, MBAs, a Master's in Business Administration, might be one of the kind of programs that you may not need to write to the professors themselves directly. What I was thinking when doing this presentation was more related to research-based programs. Many times if you write to, for example, an MBA program or a public policy program, they will give you the information you need, but they typically will send you to the admissions office. So today's talk is more about having the conversation directly with the professor or one of the professors in the program. Another consideration in the before section, determining the need to write, is the size of the program. If you see, as I mentioned earlier, a master's program with hundreds and hundreds of students, and with thousands and thousands of applications, but that will probably reduce the likelihood of the need to have to write to these programs to contact them. And then I'll go to the other extreme and say that if this is a PhD program, and this is a personal opinion, but I consider it absolutely necessary to establish contact with the program before the application actually is submitted from the admissions office to the program. So this also ties into the type of financial aid that you're looking for. So are you applying for an assistantship, which means that you would be directly working with or for the professors in the program. And again, when we're talking about the need to contact programs and program directors, what is the reason for the contact? And in most cases, it is to establish, for them to get to know you a little bit. I often relate graduate applications kind of like a job application where you're presenting yourself to the person who you want to work with during your studies. So how, again, this is the before section of the actual contact. What do we need to do, or how do we start the process? And step 2 here is what we call researching the professors online, basically just doing your homework. So based on your academic interests, and then you're trying to match that with the research area that the professor or the program is doing, that will give you kind of some indication of who you should be writing to within the program or within the school, if it's a much more broader set of contacts that you will have. And once you find the person related to your program, you will try to kind of read up on them, read their recent publications. Remember, research results in publications, so you can have an idea of what the attitude or the idea or the research focus is, so that you have a better idea of who you should be writing to and what questions, above all, you should be asking. Then simply the before process ends with a list of contacts. And so I feel like these are the programs, or these are the people that I want to write to. And so I have my final list. Now, I just want to go back really quickly and talk just about the typically in engineering, you have uh, the program director, or if you're looking at the dean of the school, you really have to be careful about who you're writing to. Many deans or program directors are also associate professors within a program, meaning they also teach within the program. So I chose engineering as an example of an area that is very broad, and you may have an electronic engineer leading the School of Engineering, but you might be a civil engineer. So you have to be really careful, especially in these larger programs, choosing the person or the people that you will write to within the program. So the contact basics, I think this is the etiquette of email, not just for university purpose, but this has to be personalized to each program. As we start talking about establishing contact, I'm not implying that you need to travel to the United States. It would be nice if everyone had that opportunity, but that's not how this works generally. We usually start out with this previous contact or prior contact through email. And I think it's time sensitive. And every time I've been around graduate admissions officers, I've asked, when should we be contacting professors? And there's really no magic answer to this question, but just let me remind you, if the programs all start in August, so the professors receiving new students in August, I'm not sure that's the best time to be writing to them for the next cohort. If they're trying to have some kind of a vacation time in July, most of them are still doing, professional email monitoring, but there might be a little bit of a lag time in getting an answer. Remember, June is the finalization of the semester. May is well, I should say May is kind of ending the semester. June is doing the administrative closing out of the semester. Now, if we go past August, so we say, well, they're receiving new students in August, so how about I write in September or October or November? Well, that could be possible, but you're getting closer to the deadline of the program, and you do not want to come across as an unprepared student. So my suggestion is April, May is the right time to write to professors. But remember, this is a year and a half out. So this is kind of, I'm not suggesting writing in April and May in 2020 to apply to study in August of 2020. No, I'm suggesting writing to professors, establishing contact in April, May of 2020, and to get accepted and to start my studies in August of 2021. Now, going just back to email etiquette, remember, and in Spanish, we use a term often conciso, preciso. We want to make these emails as punctual and precise as possible, very to the point. And I think that goes to just email etiquette, especially with professors, and not only in the US, but in many countries. Another question is, do you send your CV or not at the very first uh, email contact? And I don't have a magic answer for that. I just think that you have to kind of feel it out. One of my suggestions is that the professor or the contact will write you back in many cases and ask you for your CV in a separate as this email continues. Personally, um, I would like to see the answer from the professor before I just submit my CV in the very first email. Just a couple don'ts. We do not want to ask admissions related questions to the professor or to the program. In other words, just a basic example for just to give you an idea. Don't ask the professor what the minimum TOEFL score is for application purposes. Now, what about answers? What should we expect? And I really want you to be prepared for a wide variety of possible answers. So one of them, and we'll start out with kind of the negative side of this, is maybe they won't answer you at all. And that has happened. Um, in other cases, if the professor doesn't think that the research is right on or in line with his or with her research, that professor might refer you to someone else, which is that's a I would say not a negative answer, but that's kind of getting another contact that you perhaps didn't know about. And then we get the more information answer. That's please send me your CV. And so that's the beginning of what I consider to be the positive answers. And then you have the contact answer where they invite you to apply to their program. So the contact essentials, as I call them, just going back, again with regular email. Uh, uh, I would say etiquette. So this is a formal introduction. So it's professor or doctor and using their name as you find it listed on the contact page, whether that be a search tool or the actual university's faculty web contact. Using the proper salutation in the email, and of course the closing, and always thinking during this process how you present yourself. You do not want to include too much information in this very first contact email. So the whole idea, of course, is to make a good impression. And as I mentioned earlier, it's brief, concise, and to the point. Um, you will present yourself, I should say, with some very basic qualifications. Please do not write out your curriculum vitae in the content or the body of the email. You may want to present yourself just for the purpose of the research interest, giving some of your qualifications as it relates to your research, and then some minor, well, I shouldn't say minor, but brief background information of yourself. And remember, diversity is important for these programs, and really it depends on how you present yourself, so that the he or she professor wants to get more information from you, basically wants to carry on the dialogue. So more content, you want to show preparation, meaning you know about their program already. And I want to mention something very quickly that I talk to students or to professionals who are writing to mostly PhD programs. But the more, in many cases, we will ask a question that we already have a basic idea of the answer. It's kind of the pretext to establish contact. Of course, Their interests have to be your interests, and we need to kind of understand their interests based on their work, publications, and what, in many cases, what classes they teach within the program. And that should be easily available. If not, don't be afraid to reach out. I just want to go back to a comment I made earlier. If you are writing to a very large, like the School of Engineering, maybe the appropriate first email is, can you put me in touch with the right person for this area? And so then of course you would get that answer, and you would start a new email dialogue with someone different than the contact listed on the website. So the questions, as I mentioned, you want to ask, basically you are confirming what you think you already know about the program. And then that is one way that you will show that you are prepared, you've done your homework, and using leading questions that are easy and inviting to answer. So remember, professors generally like to talk about their research. And let's preface, I should have prefaced this um, presentation with the idea that I believe most professors at the graduate level want to talk to students. But it all depends on how we present ourselves and make this contact. And so what I say to many professionals who are applying to graduate school, this interaction you will have with the program is often described as the personality of the program. You know, if I have to write 3 or 4 times to get an answer, then I suppose that's probably the attitude I'm going to have during or the interaction, perhaps during the program. So, and I tell applicants in many cases, you often decide as you find similarities between research focuses, you will often decide on a program based on the feeling they get or the feeling you get from them in terms of them wanting more information from you, wanting you to apply to their program, as I mentioned earlier. So to wrap up this presentation and then start to take your questions, remember that a statement of purpose is an essay that you have to write for the application process, which basically has 5 sections. You know, you can cross-check this with different sources. There are different ways of writing statements of purpose. But if you look at number 3 on my list, it says the university program relevance. So through the contact, through the conversations with your professors, let me just go through the list. First, you're describing when you realized that this graduate program will be the next step in your life, in your professional development. Number 2 is describing the needs of your country, the situation of your country. And then we go to the relevance of the contact that you've established with the professor, because the university program relevance has to directly tie into number 2, which is everything you described about your country and the needs. There are lack of professionals. You can't do this graduate program in your particular country. We have underqualified people in certain positions, or this type of research doesn't exist. And I'll just give you just one quick example. I was working with an applicant for a cancer research program. And one of the comments made about Peru, specifically Peru is where I work, was that Peru is very good at treating cancer, but not necessarily researching cancer. And so that kind of information, along with supporting facts, will help put the relevance of this program in the context of your country. And then very quickly, so that we can go to your questions, the university program relevance has to tie into number 5, what you want to do later on with your, as you come back to your countries, how you want to handle or what you plan on doing in the future. So my point here is to reflect on part 3 based on the conversations you've had with program directors, um, to reevaluate the way you write your essay. Because remember, especially if it's a PhD program, you will go through the preliminary application process and then they will interview you. So the statement of purpose, I would say, is the preface or the precursor to the actual interview that you will have via Zoom or some other platform. And pre-COVID times, we've actually had students flown to the US for this kind of interview in person, in some cases paid for by the universities. So I think it's very important. As you're reflecting and in writing your statement of purpose, you need to name drop. What does name drop mean? Include the name of the professors and the kind of research, or basically that you understand the research focus that they have in their program. And I want you to use names. So that means that you have a different statement of purpose for each of your programs because you've had different conversations with each of your programs. And to wrap up this, it is okay to write to different professors. But I don't want you to put two professors against each other by asking the same question and comparing the answers, if that makes sense. And then the very last thing, you need to think about what do you offer the program as an international? Is that something, for example, Peru, we have a beautiful jungle region of Peru that has a lot of specific aspects of the jungle that they don't have in the United States. So many programs in the United States are interested in having people from those regions join their programs. It's almost like collaborative research, and going back to the diversity question. So with that, I want to bring in my colleague, Sandro Molina, who's been with us here. He's been answering your questions as we've been going along. And we can kind of open up and do some live question answering. And I've added our contact information. And before we do that, I just want to remind you, if you are not from Peru, or specifically Lima and Arequipa, where Sandro and I are currently working, you can go to educationusa.state.gov website to find the closest Education USA center to you. And I want to remind you again that the recording of this webinar will be available for 1 month. So please feel free to access it and go back through. But I would suggest contacting your Education USA advisor when it comes to contacting professors. You might be able to get more help from he or she when you are starting this process. So Sandro, can you help us with some questions?
Hi, Jason. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can.
Great. Well, I have a few questions here that we can address. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it says, let me see, about SOP. If I intend to study in the United States teaching at the university, is it important or necessary to mention my country's need?
Yeah, so now we're going from a research-based program, which would typically be a research assistantship. Now, this person mentioned a teaching position. So I would say that it really depends on the kind of program you're applying to. If the needs in your country are directly related to the teaching that you will be doing, if for the program, then I wouldn't be afraid to include it. I think by including the needs in your country, that just gives them a really good reason to want to bring you into their program. And again, just going back to the diversity point, how many people from your particular country are already in that program? But I would say yes, but more specifically if it's related to the type of teaching you will do.
Okay, we have another question, Jason. Some universities ask for a GED score in the admission process. Is there a way to avoid this requirement?
Well, if it's GED, maybe you're thinking of the GRE. If in the GRE refers to an
Probably.
exam, is it GRE or a GED?
GED,
Yeah,
that's
so
what we,
GED would be more for an undergraduate student who was looking to have a high school equivalency degree.
equivalent. Mhm.
So we're going to take out that question and kind of put that into the undergraduate category. But I will speak to the GRE exam. The GRE exam is basically the graduate record examination, which is intended to measure your preparedness for graduate school in general. So right now, especially here in COVID times, many universities are not asking for these kind of aptitude tests, but I understand that GRE does have a home version, so they may still continue to ask for the GRE. Now, that is an admissions question. I love the question, but I would not ask the professor necessarily that question. That would be for the admissions people.
That's right, Jason. She meant the GRE.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So
They,
GRE, thank you.
down the line, she corrected her question. Another question. Hi, I would like to ask if it's possible to apply to a graduate program without having finished my or their undergraduate degree by the application deadline. I guess she means, or he means that can he apply to a grad program while doing his undergrad program?
Okay, and I would say the short answer to that is no. First of all, your undergraduate GPA or transcripts, your bachelor's degree in Peru, if you have a professional title, you will send all of that information as part of the application process. So until you have your transcripts completed, you will not be able to apply. And just one more comment related to that, in that kind of line of thinking. Most graduate programs really want to see some experience between the bachelor's and the master's. And I always tell our advisees in Peru, at least the ones that I work with. I work at the Fulbright Commission, which is more graduate applicants just because the Fulbright program is a graduate program. But I tell people 1 more or 2 more years of experience is not going to hurt you. We do not discriminate against age. And as a matter of fact, uh, the lack of experience is worse than having an extra year of experience. So you may want to consider finishing your bachelor's degree and doing at least a year or 2 of experience, but it really depends on what you want to study. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Yes, a graduate from law in Peru without having el título, can she apply to an LLM program without el título?
Okay,
With
that's a very good
bachelor's,
question.
do you
Yeah,
know?
that's a very good question. Ideally, you would be colegiada in Peru before doing the application process. But I think that would be a university specific question. Or if you're applying through LSAC, which is LSAC, Law School Admissions Council, they would definitely have the requirements very specifically listed on their website as well. So really, I think that would be a program related question, but it all goes back to experience. If I am not a lawyer yet, and I will be soon, um, will the LLM program accept me without any experience? So it's not about having ser colegiado, being in the professional lawyers school, but it's about the experience you have as a lawyer. So I would recommend becoming a registered lawyer in Peru. In the United States, we say passing the bar exam and then having some experience. that I think is my final recommendation there.
Okay, and one last question. Could you give me information about which educational institutions that allow me to study aeronautical? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Most programs require a certain GPA. In Ecuador, we have a question from Ecuador. The grade is over 20. Is there any web page or organization that could help me calculate my GPA in the US system, which is 4, or to the US system?
Okay, so really quickly, I think I'm out of time on this one, but in Peru, we have something very similar. We have a 0 to 20 point scale at our university, in our university system. And the way we work with this, or to understand what the Peruvian number means, because remember in Peru, and maybe in Ecuador it's the same, but in Peru, no one finishes a 5-year bachelor's degree with a 20 average in Peru. So what happens is we would like you to ask the university, or at least in Peru, we ask universities for a constancia de puesto, or a rank, student rank. So if I'm in first place and my score is 17 out of 20, then I'm basically a 4.0 student because I'm in first place. So there is a way to do this, but it takes a lot of time because you have weighted courses versus non-weighted courses, and it all depends on how many credits. Are they faculty classes? Are they general education classes? So it's really complicated to do it precisely, but I think for most graduate programs, you are self-reporting your GPA, and they will confirm that by looking at your transcripts and the student rank. And with that, I think we're out of time, and I want to thank Sandro for helping us today and working the questions. And remember, Education USA .state.gov is the page to find the closest Education USA center, and there you have Sandro's email as well as my email, and we really appreciate your time today. So have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Good afternoon.